Welcome back, everybody, to RacePlazaMedia. My name is Milan.
My name is Pia.
And then today we're going to be talking about the F1 movie that we just watched last night.
Correct.
The way we're going to structure this video is we're first going to essentially just say whether or not we recommend the movie, if we liked it, and maybe also who this movie is more for than others.
Yeah, some like more general thoughts at the beginning without getting too far into the depth. And then we will give you a very clear, fair warning when we go into a little bit more detail, which would include potential spoilers.
Yeah.
We'll see how deep into detail we'll get. We won't go beat by beat or like moment by moment in the movie. We'll just talk about some of our standout moments, and then you can take it from there and then maybe watch the movie, maybe not watch the movie, or watch it again.
Yes. So I would say right off the get-go, I like the movie.
Yes.
I think I, however, also had the right expectations going into the movie.
Correct.
I think the marketing that they did, that this is the most realistic F1 movie and it's so real, like in realism and stuff like this, is false advertisement, because I think if you're going in there and being like, oh, this is going to be like watching F1 on Sundays and stuff like that, it's not like this. But if you go in thinking like, hey, I like the movie like Top Gun Maverick and I would like something like that, then you're in the right place.
I do want to preface that or piggyback on what you were saying a little bit and saying that the racing moments, like the actual footage of the racing was really fun. It was really
100%.
Great cinematography, great footage, and that was really exciting.
Yes.
But then if you're thinking in terms of like accuracy, in terms of actual like F1 format or general like racing format and different things, because there's not just F1 mentioned in there, there's other types of racing mentioned in there, and then some of those things are not 100% accurate, especially if you're big fans. So just keep that in mind.
Correct.
I do agree with you. Like, I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was a lot of fun. It had some funny moments. It definitely had some cheesy moments in there.
It has a lot of cheese,
which I was expecting going into it, so I was not surprised about it. I think the cheesiness might turn off some people.
I agree, because I think where like Mission Impossible, for example, they have cheese in it, but it's never too much cheese.
Yes.
This one has a few moments where I'm like, ooh, and this is like really digging into Gouda.
Exactly. But I think it was, for me at least, there were moments where it was so cheesy that it made me laugh.
Yes, I did have that as one of my notes.
Which was not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
But that's just something I think to keep in mind, because I think that would maybe have some people not enjoy the movie quite as much. I think if you go in with not the biggest expectations, expect great racing. The storyline is definitely Hollywood.
Yeah, Hollywood to the T.
Yes, it's definitely the epitome of Hollywood in terms of storytelling, instead of like cliche-y things. But the acting for the most part was really good. The racing was excellent. It was also funny. There was also some heartfelt moments. There was definitely also some really tough moments or intense moments. There was a moment where I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that this was going to go there, and I wasn't sure how far the movie would take it.
Yes, but then they're like, actually, no.
Yes, but it was still nice to have that variety of emotions. It wasn't like one note. There was a lot of different things that were in there, and I think there's of course lots of room for people to criticize it, and a lot of people will criticize it.
Yeah.
I personally would say I would watch it again.
Yes.
Because we paid for the movie tickets, and they were like, because we went to see it in AMC Prime, so we had some really great like reclining seats with seat heater.
And what I also loved, if you can first of all afford it, and if you have a movie theater in the area that does that, I highly recommend, because there are moments when they have like a car racing on it, and when it's racing by the camera, your seat will, like, there will be vibration.
Yes.
As if like and it's not an obnoxious, like how I've done like D-Box or something like that seats, and that was annoying.
Yeah.
But there I was like, oh, this feels so alive.
Yes. No, that was great, but it was almost $29 per ticket, which is a lot.
It is a lot of money.
So I wouldn't necessarily pay the $29 per ticket again.
Yeah.
I would definitely still would want to go see it again, just because I think it would be a fun movie to watch. And I would also be curious about what I've missed on my first
100%.
watch through. So, yes.
I think what I wanted to say also really quick without any spoilers, in case you want to know what the story is about. Essentially, there is a team on the track. So you have actually all the other teams that actually exist in real life.
Yes.
They are part of that, and you can actually see some of the drivers, some of the team principals, and CEOs of the
And like Will Buxton, some of the other
Exactly, some of the
commentators.
commentators you hear.
So there's lots of familiar faces in
But
there.
essentially, the story is that one of the teams, they're looking for another driver, and it's essentially about the last 9 races of the season, and they want to get a win.
Yes.
And I don't think that's too much, because that really happens within the first 15 minutes. You kind of get what this
Yes.
movie
Oh,
is
yeah.
about.
I thought you were like, oh, that's not a lot. I was like, that's a huge feat to get a win.
No. This is what exactly.
Yes.
So now I do also want to mention currently. So the release date for it is technically today, the 27th. So right now on IMDb, it has a 7.9 out of 10 and Rotten Tomatoes 83%. And once again, if you're going to go watch it, go in with an open mind. Go in to watch an action Hollywood movie that is fun, a little bit cheese. Do not expect this to be like a hyper realism F1 movie. This is, I know a lot of times they set that in marketing and stuff like that. This is not doing themselves, I think, a favor to core fans.
Yes. I hear what you're saying. I think the racing is most likely the best that it's been captured in cinema, and I think that part is correct. But like, yes, I think the marketing can be a little bit misleading, because this is also not a thriller, or it's not super intense.
No, but once again, if you like movies like Mission Impossible movies, if you like Top Gun Maverick,
or if you're like me and you love like sports movies, I'm a big sucker for anything. I like sports movies. If it's like a football movie, a rugby movie,
baseball,
like anything, they have like this like big comeback stories. Like if you like something like that, then this is definitely for you. Especially if you like the Hollywood version of that.
Yes, that is,
Yes,
exactly.
and so if you go in with that in mind, I think
you can have a fun time.
Yeah, 100%.
It can be a fun date night. It can be a fun night out with friends.
Yes.
And I would say I can 100% in that case recommend going to watch it. Now, I think we're going to get into a little bit more in-depth talks about the movie itself.
So warning, spoiler warnings.
I will say, I mean, even if you knew, it wouldn't matter. It's kind of like if you know the ending of Top Gun Maverick, it's not going to change the watching experience, because this is one of those movies where it's not like where at the end there's like a twist or is this going to happen? Like, the journey of watching the movie is what's making it exciting.
Yes,
right?
I
agree.
The
like payoff of the story at the end.
Yes.
So
it is a movie that is 2 hours and 36 minutes.
Yes, I did have to go pee during the movie.
Yeah, you did.
I was like, I can't hold it anymore.
I also had to, but I didn't go because I didn't want to miss anything.
I drank too much water beforehand.
Fair. But I personally didn't feel like it felt long.
No.
I thought there was
a good pace.
Yeah, it was a good pace. A lot of things happen. Like there's constantly things that like obstacles that are thrown in the way, or like things like that. But it was moving. I didn't feel like it was dragging at any point.
Yeah.
There was a good amount of racing in there also. So I feel like, especially for racing fans, that's very enjoyable.
Yeah, and I think that's also like, let's talk about the good stuff about the movie.
Yes.
And it's like you said, the racing, and then you can tell that the racing, that a lot of it is not CGI. I'm sure there's some CGI put in and stuff like that. But, Brad Pitt, Damson Idris. You can tell that they were in those Formula cars. So they were shooting those in Formula 2 cars that were modified to look like Formula 1 cars, because it is a big feat to race in a Formula 1 car. And of course, they're not racing at speed, but still, it's quite strenuous on the body, especially if you have no racing experience. But you can tell. It's the same way with Top Gun. It makes a difference if they take the effort to actually shoot it like that.
If they also have the money
if they have the money,
like that,
which they did. Or if if you try to shortcut it with CGI. So I think this is one of the big things. And I think the first third of the movie is my absolute favorite. I think it is so fun. Like, I'm gonna now a little bit spoiler.
Yes.
So it starts out with Sonny Hayes, who's played by Brad Pitt. He's a driver essentially past his prime a little bit. You know, he's an older driver. I think Brad Pitt, which I didn't realize is 61. I did not know that because first of all, he looks really good, but he does look like a gentleman that is probably in his 50s.
I assumed he was in his 50s. So first of all, I'm shocked because he's incredibly fit in this.
Yeah.
But he does also look like somebody who's older,
who's aged, but naturally and beautifully.
But also, yes, exactly. But like you said, it starts off at the Daytona 500, part of the IMSA circuit. People are racing, and I think like age-wise, he fits in with them because there's some younger drivers.
Yeah, absolutely.
But then there's also older drivers that are racing in GT cars and things like that. So I thought like he fit in that kind of world perfectly. I did have a little. Because we meet him when there's almost like right at the beginning, there's a driver change where he goes in and then he does like this crazy overtakes. He's incredibly aggressive on the track, which was fun to watch. Yeah. And then immediately gets you like excited because the racing of it is so intense and immediately.
It's also so awesome shot. If you're unfamiliar with the Daytona track, because it's not the oval, there is like a track that they can make out of, and
it's part of the oval, but then part is also track. Yes,
like it's a modified version of the oval, and it's first of all it's a really fun track to race on. I've raced there's a lot of GT7 races I've done on there, but the way they shot it with him racing in the Porsche GT3, and then you have the BMW, and it gets you so excited
immediately, like because first couple of minutes in, yes,
you know, they're clearly following. There's like they're actually doing this, right? And of course, it's a little bit elbows out, which is normal for GT3 racing. You know, they're not afraid to kiss.
Yes,
you know, on the track. It is really, really cool.
Yes. Yeah. But what I wanted to say, because it started off with the driver change, and then because we've watched recently a lot of GT racing and stuff like that, it was just, I thought it was funny, which it makes sense for the progression of it, because they're doing like him getting into the car, the driver change, he does like a little praying thing that he does. And then they fill up the gas, they do the tires, they do everything at the same time, essentially. Yes. And that's, of course, just not how it is.
Well, it depends. It depends on the on where you're racing, because like Le Mans, for example, you're not allowed to do that, but in other racing series you're allowed to do that.
But I thought they weren't allowed, or they don't do it typically when they also raise the car.
I don't remember. That might be because so also like it's maybe a little bit dangerous, but it's also like when I saw him praying, I was like, okay. But in the end, there's also some racing series that actually require you a minimum of pitting time. So the driver could take the time to do something like that.
Yes,
I mean, probably would do this before they get out. Yeah. But this is all, of course, Hollywoodification.
Yes, exactly. Because that's also like an ongoing thing that he does, and people also like his integrity and things like that. Yeah. And but it was cool to see them start off at the Daytona 500 before they get into the Formula One racing, because essentially like his thing is he was in Formula One 30 years ago.
He raced with Senna, with Prost.
Exactly. I mean, with legends, essentially. Yes. And he was like this new up-and-coming race car driver, but then he had this really horrible accident. And later on in the movie, we actually see it too, which I thought was cool, but also intense. And they had some footage that looked older also. And I thought the CGI to make him look younger was also decent.
I also like that when you see the older footage, it is the same thing that they actually have on F1 archives, where it's someone giving a summary of a season.
Yes.
The only thing is in the 90s, we would already have the full races available at that point. But it doesn't matter.
Yeah. But so basically we see that, and then so we know as the movie progresses that he took a long break because he was gambling and he got into debt and things like that. And then eventually he came back to racing. But then what he started doing was he was racing a league. And as soon as he won or succeeded in that racing league, he moved on to the next thing.
Yeah, he's been there, done that.
Yeah, exactly. And he was just living in a van. He didn't care about the trophies. He didn't even touch the trophies. He just wanted to.
He considers that probably bad luck. He's like, I don't want the juju. I don't want the watch.
Exactly,
I don't want the trophy.
exactly. So he just kept. So that was his thing. And he was. So essentially at the beginning, he wins Daytona 500. And then he's like in between. And he's looking at the Baja 500, which is like the desert race just here in Mexico. And as he's like looking into that, his previous teammate and rival, who now owns an F1 team, approaches him and was like, hey, I want you to be my driver. And then the funny thing is also, it turns out that he's like the 9th person that he's asking because everybody else had said no.
Which I actually like that it wasn't like, oh, this is clearly also like a desperation, right? Like, okay, let me just try this. A Hail Mary,
also,
right?
like, who offers a guy who was in Formula One 30 years ago? The cars are worlds different now.
There's probably like 20 people in F2 or in F3 or, who would take that.
Which is also something they talk about. He's like, why me? There's so many people down the pipeline. But then the thing is, they have a younger prodigy driver already in the second seat, who's played by Damson Idris. And he's like this prodigy. He's really good, but he's still really young, a little bit immature. But then we also, on his side of the story, we learn about the pressures of like social media and marketing, and does he have a future in the sport? Will he have a guaranteed seat? Because we don't know how his team is doing. And so that was really interesting to also see that side of it.
Exactly.
But one of the main things I wanted to mention as we introduce these two characters, essentially, which I thought I was expecting it differently, their relationship. Because I thought it would be immediately like butting heads. Like Sonny, which is Brad Pitt's character, versus Joshua. Damson Idris's character, that they'll immediately butt heads. But it wasn't really like that, which I appreciated, that it was not so antagonizing constantly.
Antagonistic, yes.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they do bump heads.
Of course,
yes. Because, like, essentially, Swan is how they call the younger guy's called. That's his nickname, right?
Yes. Well, that's
Pierce.
what Brad Pitt eventually calls him because that guy called Brad Pitt's character Swan at one point, because he's like, oh, so show offy, because he's just like kind of easy go lucky kind of dude. Brad Pitt's character,
or he comes off as
so exactly. Yes.
But the younger guy is essentially who Brad Pitt's character Sonny Hayes was when he was younger, right? Impulsive,
yes,
really good, but still waiting to mature. So stuff like this, and then Brad Pitt's character Sonny Hayes is essentially what happens to you if things don't go your way.
Exactly, yeah. But so what I thought was really cool, once Sonny joins the team, that he is actually there to help the team. That's his goal. He wants the team to do well. He wants to help the car. He wants the team to succeed. So the big goal is to get a win. But the first goal is to just finish a race. That's step one. Finish a race, step one, then get into the top 10, and then, of course, win by the end of the season. 9 races, which is incredible. That's like as if at the beginning of the season, Kick Sauber was like, oh, yeah, we need to win a race this season, otherwise we're out, essentially.
Yeah, or essentially the majority owner, he would be bought out, and then someone else would be taking over the team, which happens all the time if you're probably not competitive. However, to the expectation for it to be like, I get, because it's a movie, it has to be a win. It can't be like the expectations we score a point.
Of course,
because
like it has to be
the
high
stakes are not high enough.
Yes.
But in the end, in F1, it would be more realistic. Let's get some points on the board, because that literally can get us millions of dollars later on, right?
Yes.
But I understand that, especially for viewers that don't watch any F1.
Yes.
It would be like, so that's like one of the reasons where, like, okay, this is like where realism and Hollywood, they're never gonna mesh.
Yes.
But not in a way where it would bother me, because I actually really liked that the story was about the last 9 races instead of a full season, which can be quite long, 24 races in a season usually. So being like, okay, just in the last 9 races of the season, that is actually really, I really like that.
Yes. And there was also like moments, of course, we meet some of the crew members, different team members, different owners, and also like their relationship. It was really interesting. And then, of course, a big character in the whole movie is also our technical director, who is a woman, the first technical director on the paddock, female technical director in the paddock. So she has a lot to prove. So that was also really interesting. One of our criticisms was...
But we'll get to that later. Let's still talk about the positives.
Okay, sure. So what I was saying originally was, like, I really liked the relationship at first, that also Sonny was trying to help the younger guy.
Yeah.
Sonny was never, or it didn't seem like he wanted to be the number 1 driver. Like he was there to support the team. And for him, it seemed like he was only there for a short time, a good time, not a long time, essentially. So he was there to also support the younger guy, like to help him get ready. And you could also hear on the radio, like him helping the engineer and also helping the other driver making the calls.
Which seems sometimes like gives me flashbacks of Alonso. It's
yes.
like Alonso telling his race engineer, like, tell Lance to put their brake differential on 3 because it's good for whatever.
No, exactly. So, which I think which I enjoyed.
Yes.
That they were working together, but also it seemed at times that he was directly talking
it
to
seems
Joshua.
Like a group chat at times.
Exactly. Especially once the moments got very heated or intense.
Exactly, because the way they cut it, it also means it almost made it seem like they're looking at each other almost while racing, which they're not going to make eye contact, right?
Yes.
And then also to be like, almost chatting on the team radio.
And it was a lot of teamwork.
Yes.
Like
which I actually really liked.
Which I love too.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily indicative of Formula One.
Yeah.
Which I'm fine with.
Yes.
And actually that's, like I said, I like that about it, because it was not constantly one driver against the other driver. It was not just that story. There was a little bit more to the story. There was lots of side stories and storylines, but it also didn't feel like there was too much going on.
Yes. Another thing I wanted to bring up, what I really liked about it, is that they used actually footage from real races. So some of the races that they're doing, you can see things happening in the background that happened in real races. So for example, there's one race where they're racing in Mexico, and you can actually see the Checo DNF that happened in lap 1 at his home Grand Prix, where he essentially, way too aggressive into, I think it was like T1, which is like the baseball corner. And I don't know if that's T1.
I don't know what it is, but I know exactly the moment that you're talking about.
Yeah, and then he essentially, he crashes out, and you can see that kind of just happening in the background.
Yeah.
So it's really cool, and I could imagine that if I would watch it again, there's more scenes from different races that I would recognize, because obviously you're a little bit more focused on what's happening in the front compared to what's happening in the back.
I agree. But you definitely you recognize the tracks, and they also, of course, talk about the tracks. We have Silverstone, Monza, the Yas Marina circuit. I mean, there's a couple more, but it was really cool to see that. And also the first time we get into the F1 paddock, I got a little bit of goosebumps because it was right there. And then you see them walking amongst the crowds in the paddock, and they filmed it there.
Yeah, that's what you meant. Yeah.
And then so like seeing that the first time, and also seeing their garage for the first time, and like so pristine.
Yeah.
And so those were really nice moments, and got me also just excited because they filmed it there. They were filming it in the actual F1 paddock at moments, and it's like just seeing that there was really fun. And then, like we said, you had these moments of commentating from like Will Buxton and Martin Brundle and people like that, and that was really cool to hear them talk about it.
Talking about the commentating, which I really loved, when you see some racing, you can actually hear Martin Brundle. Like it's not like as if it's in a race. It's obviously like there's some audio editing done, but it's really well done.
Yeah, and he recorded things for it too, which is really cool.
So it's it's like the typical commentary about like, oh, Sonny Hayes, the driver, blah, 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 blah. And it felt really good. And this is also one of the things I really liked, because I thought this something that might not work out well, but I thought the bridge that they made between real life F1 and movie F1, where you have the drivers, the real team principals that you can see that are also talking, it is very well incorporated in a way where it doesn't bother me.
Yeah, and it seemed to work so cohesively together. It didn't seem out of place.
Correct.
Because even like the battling on track, there's moments, there's like, oh, there's Ocon or Pierre Gasly, and it just seemed to work so smoothly. Although Apex is kind of in their own world, because they're very often battling at the back of the track. There were still moments where he's like, oh, he's against Max Verstappen. And then you hear Max over the radio, naughty, or something like that, which was really cute. So it was, I think they did incorporate it well. And then we also had this one really funny moment in the press conference where Fred has his one, but really savage
awesome
line in it.
So essentially there is the team principal of the Apex team, which is the movie team, and then there is a Zach Brown from McLaren there, and then Fred Vasseur. And essentially interviewer is asking both of Zach and Fred how he feels about Apex, blah blah blah, and then Zach is like, "Oh, I like they're in the back. We don't really care." Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then
Fred was asked like, "Oh, so what do you think about Apex?" And he's like, "We don't think about them." Essentially,
in his perfect Fred way.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's like a line that he would just come up with.
He would say,
but he's not quite as savage, I would say, but it's still like it seemed fitting for him to do it. And then later on in the movie, there's a moment with Toto, which was also, it worked.
Yeah, it worked really, really well.
So it was nice. And then you also like they had like podium moments where you can see actual moments from the
last year's podium,
then also like some that were created for the movie. And it's nice to see the actual F1 drivers in it. Like, of course, we have the lineups there and things like that,
but once again, never in a way that it feels unnatural.
Yes.
Or like, oh, this feels like shoehorned in or anything. Like, this is once again very cohesive. And I think also if you would watch this movie maybe like in like 10, 15 years and you go watch it and be like, oh, remember this and stuff like that.
That is actually a good good thought that you had, because I didn't even think about it, because especially I think as F1 fans and especially in this generation, there's a lot of newer F1 fans or people that are familiar with the people on the grid right now.
Correct.
So for us to maybe watch it in 10 or 5 to 10 or whatever years, then to like see them again, I think that is actually a really fun thing.
And I think it's also almost the better thing to it's almost because they made it work so well. I think it is almost ingenious to incorporate the real drivers, because it makes for real F1 fans. It's like it feels more natural. If you've never watched F1, it doesn't really matter to you, because they don't really play a big role in the movie itself. It doesn't matter. But if
it's
but
just
as a fan of the current F1, right, or F1 in general, right, it is nice to see, because I think if I would have had then people pretending to be other F1 drivers, I don't think I would have maybe like sat with me differently in a way that it didn't feel as nice.
I 100% agree with that, because it even if they did a good job, I think something would still irk me about it. And because they're not integral to the story per se, and they don't have to do really like a lot of acting in it. So I'm not bothered by it. Because if they would have asked too much of them, then maybe it would have bothered me if they were like suddenly like Charles do a monologue and then he does a monologue and it just doesn't like connect, because he's not an actor, you know?
I think the most acting from that world had to do was Zach Brown and was probably Toto.
Yeah.
Because they had the longest sentences.
And in a way, maybe the commentators, although they were doing things that were theirs, but it wasn't their lines that they were saying, maybe.
Well, yes, but I do think there's also an advantage because they already have experience doing that for the F1 game.
Of course.
And this is also one thing that I also want to say. You sometimes get this F1 TV pod view, which is a lot of people use an F1 in the F1 games to race, and it's just so awesome. It looks so awesome.
Sometimes, very rarely, get it on F1 TV. I feel like there was recently a race where they did it. I think it was in Canada. And you could see it, and it just, that's when you really notice the speed, or not even, like that's when you get a little bit of a glimpse how fast it actually is, or the distances that they cover in such a short amount of time, which is essentially speed. But like, but just in different words, you know, but it just you become so much more aware of it.
100%.
And then so seeing that, because they had this moment where they were driving at the Yas Marina circuit and they had that view, but they also had it, which I enjoyed it for quite a little bit of a longer time, or like a longer stretch of the track, because it was part of like that moment that they were building and working towards and things like that. That it was just so beautiful. Especially as a racing fan, it's just something I could really
appreciate.
Yes, exactly.
So I think there's probably other stuff that will come up. Once again, I did want to highlight again, I did like how they were pushing the idea to the front also that F1 is a team sport, or racing is a team sport. Because I think if people are new to racing, watching racing, any type of racing, you would think it's just a driver doing their thing, and then when they win, they're happy and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But racing very much is a team sport.
Yes.
You know, it's starting from the engineers and the people in the factory, right? The people who put the car together, right? The people who will. What I also really loved is the first time Sonny Hayes gets into the F1 car before, essentially there is one of the racing engineers who gives him a breakdown.
Yes.
You can see how they're analyzing the laps, how he's explaining him how the steering wheel works and stuff like that.
I would love to see somebody break down or look at those screens to see.
I'm sure we're going to get a video.
I know. I'm sure somebody will do it, but I do expect them to be very accurate.
Yeah, I think
just
so.
because of Sir Lewis Hamilton being a part of it or being a producer of the movie, and hearing that he had such specific feedback about the sound of the cars, I'm sure that it was important for him to show, to represent whatever is shown on the engineers' screens and strategist screens, for that to be very accurate. But yes, it's very much a team sport. We had moments with the pit crew and like their character development essentially too. Then we also have a big thing that's part of a storyline where there's design elements of the vehicle, working out design elements of the vehicle, wind tunnel. There's also like a little bit of FIA involvement there. I don't want to get into all the details, but like, so there's a lot of different elements that bring into it. But there's one big moment where somebody says, like, this is a team sport. This is not just about the driver. And you also notice it pretty early on when Sonny joins the team at first. There's this moment where Joshua gives feedback about the car, and he's not very
clear.
And he's not very specific and doesn't give like enough for the technical director and them to figure out based on his feedback what changes they can make. And then of course the experienced driver comes and he's like, oh, this and this and this and this needs to change. Obviously he knows that that's not everything, but it shows, because we know there was also, I think Senna was very famous for knowing the technical bits of it and being able to communicate it so specifically to his engineers so they can adjust the car accordingly. Because that's what I love about the sport. It's there's so much specificity.
Yeah, there's actually this famous Kimi Räikkönen story where he is like, there's something wrong with the car, and then they look at it and there's nothing wrong with the car, and he was like, no, there's something wrong with the car, and then they took the whole car apart and it turned out there was a crack in the frame.
Wow.
And he felt that, and I was like, this is exactly what it is, right? Because the drivers who are just like the elite and who are just also super experienced, they are able to communicate it and feel every little thing what is wrong with the car.
It's like a Princess on the Pea.
Exactly. Yeah, I think
it's
in the Rush movie, isn't it, where Niki Lauda says like, I'm not the prettiest guy, but I got the ass that can tell what's wrong with the car.
It's exactly that, right? That's very true. But like, they know it, and it's just a matter of communicating and stuff like that. But yes.
So do you have anything else you wanted to talk about that's really good about the movie? I'm sure there's more things. These are the things that we kind of talked about everything that I had mentioned. Okay. I did also really like the cast.
Yes.
There's no one in the cast that I was like, oh, this was a miss.
Yes. I also liked it because there was like this bad guy in it, one of the owners on the board of the team, and he was like one of the big antagonists. Then he was kind of being sneaky also in the way he was playing the system, and he was trying to get Sonny on his side. And I really liked him also, the way he played it and his
because
character.
He wasn't overtly like, he seemed more like someone who's like, listen, there's an opportunity for me
there for the money.
For to make money and also, better my position. And this is really more like a business thing, even though he is doing some, things like, doing some shady things.
Yeah. I thought also a lot of
Tobias Menzies is his name, right? Peter Banning. He's playing.
I thought a lot of the characters had a lot of character to them in different ways. Some not so much, but that might be one of the things that we're talking about next. But the last thing I wanted to mention also, which I really enjoyed, and I think it was also visible when I was watching the movie, is the music.
Yes.
I thought the music and the sound in general was a lot of fun. How the choices also that they made with some of the driving and the racing. It was was a vibe, you know. It was like it was a lot. I enjoyed the soundtrack.
I feel like when you watch this movie, I walked away from feeling like, oh, I want to jump on the sim and race now.
Nice.
You know, it's like it makes you motivated to either maybe watch racing or play a racing game or jump onto the sim or something like that.
Literally, we were talking with a friend that we went to go see it, and we were all so stoked now for this weekend's races coming up.
Yeah.
So it's definitely.
Better not let us down.
Huh?
Better not let us.
I know,
down.
seriously.
The Austrian GP. It's a fast track.
It's and it's Austrian a track too.
Yeah.
But yes, so I don't want to mention the sound because right from the beginning, essentially, they had really great sound. Ed Sheeran, of course, has the big song at the end of the movie. It's like a little bit more rock, but there's also some moments that are a little bit more synthy. There's some moments that are a little bit more dance, I think.
Some hip hop in
like
there.
A good variety of songs, but I was vibing and jamming out to the music in the movie theater.
Now, let's talk about the things that I would label quote unquote the bad stuff that I didn't like about the movie. You know.
Yeah.
So I think the number one thing is there's actually one thing that I disliked even more. That sounds very bad, but once again, too much cheese. There's some moments where it's like you pushed it a little bit too far with making it like there's a lot of one-liners, you know, and a lot of like, oh, I'm gonna say something thoughtful and I'm gonna leave you with this so you can figure it out. These type of situations,
like a mic drop, but like
exactly
almost on the cringy end of it.
Yeah, and sometimes it is like really dipping their foot into the cheese.
Yes, which is why my reaction to some of those lines was to laugh.
Yeah, 100%.
Also, I think for me, it was just on the edge of it that I didn't find it uncomfortable or anything.
It wasn't uncomfortable. No.
But there was definitely moments where I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't think we were the only ones in the movie theater who had that reaction during those moments.
Yeah.
But I agree. It was a little bit more cheese or Hollywood cheese that I was expecting.
A little bit more.
Because it gave me more, I mean, Hollywood is America, but it gave me a little bit more like American Hollywood cheese than it would be like a Ford versus Ferrari.
Yeah.
Didn't give me that. I didn't expect that type of movie anyways because it's a little bit more serious and things like that. But yeah, it's definitely it's very specific.
It is. I will say, because I definitely laughed during moments where I'm not sure if it was intended for people to laugh, but because it was just so over the top and ridiculous at a time.
Exactly.
Or silly, really. Yeah.
I hope they made it with the intention for people to laugh because they knew they pushed it that far. And I hope that was the intention. So,
now... that's the thing that you wanted to say. The relationship between Sunny Hayes and the racing engineer,
technical director. So, like we said, it was a woman, the first one in the paddock. So she has a lot to prove herself.
One of 3 women that are in that movie.
Yes.
Yeah, there's one, the social media one.
Oh, the PR woman. Then there's one
which I think she had more scenes, and I think it was cut. Because why would you make her so prominent in the beginning?
I guess so. Yeah. Well, there was one character that was almost completely cut, which we
her name is Simone, right?
Simone Ashley, the actress who became really famous through Bridgerton. She was in one scene. You saw her, or at least I saw her in one scene, but she had this big side story apparently.
I'm assuming it's probably a relationship between her and Dempsey's character.
That's what I was thinking.
I'm going to be honest, whatever they cut, I didn't miss it.
Yes. No, I agree with that, but I just feel really...
Yeah, of course.
It's just
if
so
you have
shitty.
Such a big role, and then all of a sudden you cut down to one sentence.
And it's also the only woman of... Oh, no, there's another woman of color in it.
Oh, sorry, then there's 4 women.
Yes.
Technically, yeah. I forgot.
But anyway, so the technical director, so she's this big woman in terms of like...
Not physicality.
No, yeah, because she's like... intelligent, and she has this big role in the team and stuff like that, and then her and Sunny immediately have like little like hots for each other, obviously, but she's like, oh, you gotta finish a race first before
You're also 20
I even
years
listen
older than
to
me.
you. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, she's a great actress.
Yeah.
I know some of their moments or her moments also were like, oh, this is just because a lot of characters had like little soliloquies, little monologues.
Yeah.
Which was, I was like,
The poker scene was really uncomfortable, I thought.
Yes.
The poker scene was uncomfortable. Essentially, there's a scene where she invites both drivers after they once again crashed each other in a race to come meet her at a bar. Both of them obviously not knowing the other driver is going to come. And then essentially they're doing a Texas Hold'em poker game to decide who's going to be the number one driver for the next race. And it was a little uncomfortable and cringe because it was just like, okay, girl, like, this is really not your job. It should be the team principal.
Yeah, it should be
the team principal who
that's
should be there. I get why she was there, because then it also sets up then what we both thought was an unfortunate choice.
Yeah, so basically she ends up in a
hook up.
She ends up hooking up with him, and then they do, it sounds like, are gonna have a relationship after this movie ends, essentially. But yeah, it was like, she's like the one big woman in it. She has the biggest female role in it. And she's immediately has to be associated or in a relationship with the lead guy.
Yeah, and you could have had this relationship if you needed Sunny to hook up with the person, right?
Yeah.
If you needed that romance, it could have been like a journalist.
Yeah.
It could have been anyone that is not part of the team, really, because it is this really unfortunate thing where it's like, okay, of course the woman would be hooking up with the hot racer and stuff like that. And it's already, I think, difficult for women in sport. I mean,
it's really frowned upon for any of the women on the paddock to date people on the paddock. I've read multiple reports about this.
I get it, because you'll immediately probably get some type of reputation.
Yeah, which is unfair.
It is unfair because, like, obviously with men it wouldn't be like that, but it is unfortunate that they did make that choice for her to hook up with their driver. There's no repercussions for her for doing that in the movie, which is kind of nice, because she is a grown woman, so you can do whatever the fuck you want. Exactly. And you're technically not Sunny's boss, right?
No,
because it's on the technical side, so it's different. They just work together, but it is just unfortunate that you made that decision.
Yes.
It should have been a different character.
Yeah.
Or then if you wanted there to be a relationship, then maybe do the one with Dempson and Simone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, it was also their relationship. There were moments that were just a little like odd, I thought. Like the moments on the balcony.
Yeah, because it seemed like he was surprised that she was being all cuddly with him, where he was like, dude, what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I don't know. But also, they're like literally 20 years of age difference. Yeah. You know, I mean, granted, he looks really young for his
Brad
age.
Pitt, I guess that's why.
And of course, he's Brad Pitt, so you can get away with it a little bit. Yeah. But yeah, so it's like, but yeah, so that was definitely one of the things I didn't love about it, but it didn't make me hate the movie.
No.
Because I thought also why I can maybe accept it a little bit more is because she was, in a way, in power. And she made the decision.
She could do the abuse if she wanted to.
No, that's not what I meant. But she didn't let herself be seduced by him. And she set the rules, essentially.
Well, and it's also, she kind of knew that there was an end to it anyways, right? He was going to be gone. Yeah. So she was like, if I'm going to hook up with Brad Pitt.
Now it's the time.
Now or never, right? Okay, so moving on from that. I think this is actually my number one thing that I really didn't like about this movie.
Okay.
And I thought it almost promoted
I know exactly what you're talking about now.
Just like dirty driving. Just because a lot of times the way the Apex team ends up like gaining positions and stuff like that is by Sunny doing things that are illegal.
Yes.
You know, purposely crashing 3 times in the first race to give your teammate an advantage. This is why Fabio Briatore is not allowed to be part of F1 anymore, right? Yeah. Because there was Crashgate. And it's also a little bit unfortunate because we just had a situation like this where a driver purposely crashed into someone else, right? And it was a huge upset. Yes. Like, a lot of people were not happy about this, right? And so the timing is a little bit unfortunate, but I just didn't like that it was like, we have to fight dirty in order for us to win.
Yes.
You know?
Well, because, literally every time. So either they crashed on purpose or did things to manipulate the race.
In a way that would be illegal.
That was, exactly. That was not necessarily just on track racing. Then there was a lot of moments where Sunny slowed down the pack,
which is fine,
which is not illegal, but that was like one of the maneuvers And they had this whole thing where so it was like it was their plan C, plan chaos, or plan combat.
Which is insane, dude. These people are driving at like 300 kilometers, 350 kilometers an hour.
Insane.
And you're going to purposely crash
Not
someone?
only that, but it's also like every time he loses part of his wing or punctures a tire, it gets into the gravel. There's like hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars of damage.
They don't have cost
and
cap.
the team is already broke.
Yeah.
And they've had, I mean, during those 9 races, they probably went through at least, I'm sure somebody will count this.
Yeah.
But I think they went through at least like 4 or more cars or chassis, then many more wings and extra tires.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the idea that in one race you can purposely damage your wing 3 times, it's just that, like, I actually like that when the first time Sonny gets into the car, he ends up crashing, right?
Yes.
And I think this is really realistic for someone to spin out the first time
and
in
also,
an F1.
it was well done also because he didn't do immediately great. There's definitely some mistakes, some understeering, oversteering that happens. And then there's this moment right before he finishes the lap where it's like, oh, everything's coming together. He's doing so well. And then it just happens because it happens so fast.
Yes.
So I did like that. I agree.
I really like that he did end up crashing it. I mean, Kimi Antonelli crashed a bunch of the Mercedes in practice leading up to the his first F1 season, you know, and it just happens, right?
Yes.
People crash the F1 car. It's something that happens and it's part of the sport. And I did actually like it the first time he did it. I also love the way he walked away from it, right?
Yes.
And what I will point out is though, when he did his he did his out lap, right? And then he spun in the out lap. And then so he did his first testing lap on Silverstone. And then going onto the straight to start on his real lap, he spun out before, so it's like a right-hander that goes onto the straight, right? And then he was like, okay, I'm gonna do my lap now, right? And then people are like, oh my god, he's a 10th down. I'm like, homeboy didn't even have the speed that you wanted to go, but this is all movie stuff.
Yes.
So as someone who would be like, this is actually not bad that he's only a 10th down for not having the run-up speed that you would need to actually do a proper lap, because you would probably do another warm-up. But sorry, again, sorry, you wanted to say something?
I wanted to just piggyback off of the point that you had originally made about this being not promoting toxic racing, but displaying that, which is not, but it also, for people who might have never watched F1 and watching the F1 movie first, and then potentially go into watching F1, it's not as elbow out. I mean, there's moments, of course, but it's not as quite as much as it is displayed in the movie. And then, of course, we touched briefly on like that there's lots of technical aspects that are not 100% accurate. Like there's qualifying for the most part, like it doesn't exist or they don't talk about it. There's a couple mentions of it, but it seems often that the first time they're on the track is for the actual race.
Yeah, there's no such thing as free practice or qualifying.
Yes, so that was,
like
but
that.
I mean, that's fine. Like it takes up extra time. We don't need it for the story.
Well, this actually goes into one of my wishes for maybe if there's going to be an F1 Part 2 movie or something like, I didn't want to say F2 movie.
Yeah.
But would be like, because I think this would have been a really great opportunity to lay the bridge between, for people who are obviously hardcore fans and people who have never watched it and casual fans, to be like, hey, in practice they gather essential data. This is where you do setup changes, and you don't even have to really do a lot, but you could do this in like less than a minute.
I hear what you're saying.
Just to bring that realism a little bit back.
Okay.
And then you can have a cool montage and be like, okay, yeah, this and this setup, and then it will give me, and then you can have like the time pop up in green. You have faster time. There could have been ways to incorporate that without making it too technical.
Yeah.
This is like a wish that I would have had for the movie.
I hear what you're saying. I think they did incorporate it in parts when they did like the driving in the sim, practicing different setups and going and practicing, which is one of the things I also wanted to mention that I really appreciated about the movie, that they show that it is actual hard work.
Yes.
Especially Sonny coming back to F1 after 30 years away. He's been racing for the last 20 years, not in F1, obviously. So it's very different. They do emphasize also that F1 is the pinnacle of motorsports. It's like you're a true world champion if you win in F1, which I think is true.
Yeah.
But then also you see him, there's lots of montages where you see him studying the strategy, going through the engineering handbook, whatever it is, working out, exercising, doing things on a pretty like low budget way. And then his teammate does it on like a little bit of a bigger budget ways. But it also kind of cool that he, the younger teammate, sees Sonny do those things and learns from it and improves his like work ethic and his way of looking at things, because then he also shows up really early at the track, even before the engineers and everybody else, as Sonny does. And then the other guy eventually walks in with the sunglasses and stuff. And he's like, oh, well, how long has he been here? Well, he's been here before everybody else. So it's like his work ethic. But that's, okay, so that's, I'm babbling. But the thing that I really appreciated is they show that it is a lot of hard work.
Yes.
There goes a lot into it. Like you've been saying, it's teamwork, but it's also individually a lot of work that you have to put into it. You don't just sit in a car and you just do it.
Yeah, it's not like you just get in, you do your race, and then you go home.
Exactly.
Right? I will say one of the things I had written down as quote unquote bad or unbelievable is the idea that Damson's character is the night before the race is going to a club. Like, I would be really surprised if any of the drivers would actually be doing that. I think if you're competing at such a high level, every ounce of sleep, every good sleep, it will give you the competitive edge. And you know, all of these races are so competitive on and off the track. There's no way. But I get this is supposed to like show the storyline of him being like, hey, there's, you know, if you really want to be the best, you have to, you know, put in the work. You're not going to go to club the day before the night before the race.
Yeah, no. I mean, nobody's saying that F1 drivers don't know how to party, because we've all seen some of the pictures of Max Verstappen and Lando in the club and stuff.
But that's all after, right?
After, exactly.
First of all, also after you won something.
Yes.
Not just like you celebrating that you crashed out, which that was a whole cringe scene anyways. When he's like to the press. I was like, dude, what are you doing this for? You were fighting for 21st place, essentially? Or what is it, 20 cars on the track or 22 cars on the track?
I thought it was... no, it must have been maybe 22 cars on the track then.
I'm uncertain because like because Sonny also says to him, like, what are you celebrating about? There's 20 cars still on the track actually fighting for. But I couldn't see
I don't know right now.
But then he's celebrating, essentially. He's doing this winning pose to the press. But it's like, you didn't even come 21st. You crashed out. Yeah. You know, that was the whole thing. But so this was like, for me, really the biggest thing is that I didn't, that I thought it was a little bit too much of breaking F1 regulation. And also like switching the driver the day of a race, which we just had the scenario, which is also once again unfortunate. Lance Stroll recently wasn't able to compete in a race, and it was too late for them to put in their reserve driver. A little bit unfortunate that the timing in real life is with a movie like that.
That's so true. I didn't even make that connection. But yes.
Yeah, but this is also, I think a lot of people will never think about. Yeah. Especially if you're more of a casual watcher. But me, I personally, once again, I just wished there would have been, because I like that there's an insane amount of overtaking is expected, because you cannot do this like how it would be in real F1 where someone, you know, overtaking 10 cars is like insane.
Yeah, and then there was also this moment there was like double DRS.
Yes, double DRS, which was a mistake, yes.
Yes, exactly.
I had that written down too, which is, once again, I don't think probably a lot of people would have noticed, but if you are an F1 fan, you can see, I think it is when Sonny is battling with Max, or one of the drivers.
I don't remember if it was Max or somebody else, but then both of them suddenly had DRS, and there was no other car there, so they got DRS from each other.
Which is not possible.
Yeah.
Only one of them can have DRS. But this is like things, but for me, like, I just genuinely would have wished that there would have been a little bit less amount of like crashing into each other, because it also make it seem like, oh, you crash and then life just goes on. Yeah. And then, sorry, the last thing I want to say about bad things, and then I have just things that I wanted to bring up that are neither good or bad, is that they always push, team sport, right? But then Sonny at first is not a team player at all. He's like, he gets in the car and he's like, these are not the tires I want, so I'm gonna sit here for a minute,
that is so
which
true.
would ruin your race.
Yes.
Like, overall, he probably lost at least 45 seconds.
Yeah.
In that part. That would be the end of your race. But so I'm like, he's not being the team player as much as he could be, and then he does improve. But this is like really picking.
Yes.
This is like, there's so many scenes that you could go in and pick apart.
Oh,
but
100%. Yeah.
then you're looking at the movie in a wrong lens, in my opinion.
I agree.
So now, other things I wanted to mention. One of the things you already said was music, so I can check that off. The other thing, so there's a really big crash that you had hinted to earlier, right? It's almost gave me flashbacks, a little bit of the Zhou Guanyu crash.
Yeah, it was like a mix
mixed
of
with the Grosjean
exactly
crash, because there was an exact reenactment of the Grosjean crash reaction when you see the technical race engineer operation. The woman, what is her job again?
technical director.
She reacts like she puts her hand over her mouth, and I have never watched DTS, but I've seen clips of this reaction of this woman who's part of Grosjean's garage, who reacts like this, like puts her hand over her. I think she has a mask on it because it's during pandemic. And it's literally one-to-one reaction.
Oh, I didn't know that. That gives me chills a little bit.
Yes, because obviously there's like a huge crash, which is a little bit Hollywood fight, but then again, we saw like what happened with Grosjean's car, and we saw what happened with Zhou Guanyu. And the only reason why Zhou Guanyu didn't end up outside of the barrier is because there was fans sitting there and there was a net.
Yes.
Otherwise, there would have maybe not been a net as high, and he would have just flung over.
Yes.
So this was just something I wanted to point out, the exact reaction from Grosjean
That's
crash.
really cool.
And I'll show you the picture, and I'll put it into the video so people can see. I don't know if I can find the picture from
the movie,
but I can at least show it from Grosjean.
Yeah, but I also like that moment was very intense because I didn't know how far they would take it, and I was
because
like,
I was also thinking Niki Lauda.
Yeah, I mean there's so many possibilities, but it was definitely I thought it was well done. But now knowing that it's kind of like has like moments callbacks to actual F1 things, which makes me even more excited to go and find, or for somebody to make a video with the Easter eggs, and then I can just watch that.
Yeah, that would be me. Then
yes.
Oh, this is one thing. This is so niche. No one else besides probably us would really care about this stuff. Is that I really dislike it when they cast people as German speakers who do not speak German. You know, so the guy who plays the team principal of the Apex team, he is cast as a German speaker. I don't know if he's Austrian or if he's German.
He's Danish.
He's Danish. I don't know why he's speaking German then. Oh, no, the actor is Danish.
Sorry, that's what I meant. Yes.
Yeah, the actor is
Danish.
But then he's cast as a German speaker, right? Either he's German or Austrian, and he does, and you can hear when he's speaking German, and the same thing as his wife, who has such a small role that neither of them speak German. And I'm like, why? You know, obviously, if you're watching this as a non-German speaker, you would never know.
Yes.
But it immediately always pops out to me. It's like, you speak German or you do not.
Yeah.
And even if he does speak German, you're not a fluent, or like you're clearly German is not your first language.
Yeah.
So I'm always like, oh, why would you do that? You know, just cast someone who speaks German then.
Or just have him be Danish. Like, who cares?
Yeah, who cares? I don't know why he had to be German.
Yes.
It's like, make him Danish, or then at least make his wife German, because homegirl ain't German either.
Yeah, I know. So apparently he is Danish. But his family background is Russian, Polish. He says he's half Russian, half Polish, and full Jewish.
Okay, because we know him from Killing Eve. I think he plays a Russian,
like
there,
Russian or somebody like there. That. Yeah, exactly.
Because he's the
her handler.
He's her assassin's handler. He gives her the contracts, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. What's your next point? Did you have another one?
No, I think, well, the only other thing that I had written down, a lot of the stuff we had actually already covered, is just, once again, I wish they would have not promoted as much as realism, which I think could have really hurt them. But it seems right now so far, a lot of people like the movie, so it didn't hurt them in the ratings. I think over the next, probably over the weekend now, there will be more ratings that will come in.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the last thing is, I think if they would make another movie, which it seems like the movie's doing really, really well. especially because it does have competition right now with the Mission Impossible movie coming
Yeah,
out
exactly.
and Ballerina and stuff like that. Is I wish that they will then also introduce the concept of free practice and qualifying and maybe bridge a little bit in ways where it, because I think you can give the audience a little bit more credit. I think even if a non-viewer, if you would see, like, because you can make it a little bit interesting, right?
No.
And also visually understanding that, I think, for me, I think that would be just like a really nice ad. And this is just a wish.
I hear what you're saying. Like I said, I don't necessarily agree with it because I also think people have DTS they can watch to then learn a little bit more about it and then go to the Formula One race. But yeah, so I think that's just me. However, what I want to say, because you keep hinting at it, and about a second F1 movie, I don't want a second F1 movie.
Oh, so for me, I would be okay with one, but it could be like completely different. Or it could be like a F2 movie or someone trying to come from F2 to F1.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be like next year. It could be like in 5 years from now. If they would then make another movie, I would be okay with it.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
So I wasn't hinting as like, oh, let's make a part 2 out of it, because this story is told and there's no need to come back to this.
That's what I was thinking. Like, this story, I think for me is done.
Or maybe like if you're doing 10 years from now and then Damson Idris' character is like already more of an, you know, how they do with Top Gun or whatever. He's more now the experienced driver.
Yes.
But I'm not asking, but I'm saying like if they would then make another movie at some point, I don't want a part 2 to this.
Yeah.
I, in general, am anti-sequels.
Yes.
That's
why I was like, why are you keep bringing this up? Because I think the story, the way it ends, I enjoyed the ending also of it. I feel like it buttons it up nicely.
Yeah, 100%.
There's nothing left open for me really that I need this storyline or this universe to continue.
Yeah.
However, I agree that I wouldn't be opposed to having another like type of racing movie where the racing is this type of excellent.
Yeah.
I would
100%.
I would love it if it has maybe more of a serious tone. Or has a little bit more of a grit to it, maybe not so Hollywood, not so bright and contrast colors. You know what I mean? Have a little bit more of like a grittiness to it, but the same type of racing. I wouldn't be opposed to that, but I don't need another F1 movie per se.
Yes, I agree with it. I mean, if once again they make a movie like. Make it someone from F2 coming up or something like that. Make it completely different.
I mean, I could imagine one day we might have a Lewis Hamilton biopic.
100%.
You know, I mean, not now, a little bit later.
Yeah, because he's also still on the grid.
No, of course. I mean, we did have the Senna show come out on Netflix recently. I haven't watched it yet. But so we'll see. But do you have anything else to say, or
overall I would say fun movie. If you're looking for a fun, exciting movie that is along the lines once again as like Top Gun Maverick, it's from the same director, Mission Impossible style movie with some cheese and Hollywood F1, I think you're in for a great treat. It's a perfect video movie to watch like on a Saturday night out with friends, or go on Tuesday matinee, so it's a little bit cheaper. Just, you know, be excited for a good time. Get your popcorn, sneak it in, don't even pay for it.
Talk about afterwards too.
Absolutely.
It's like so I agree. I recommend the movie. I highly recommend the movie.
I recommend also paying for it, because I do think a movie like this pays off big time to watch it on the big screen.
100%. Even if you can do the Prime like we did, the seating was spectacular. It was such a fun and immersive kind of experience. So yes, I definitely recommend it. I really enjoyed it. It was not 100% what I had expected. I didn't have high expectations. It was not exactly what I was expecting.
Sorry, but the beginning of the movie is so good. I love
that you love it so much.
When it started up and then they do the shot with the GT3, I was like, this is so good. I was like, give me a GT3 movie with the cars like this. Oh, it was so good. I genuinely was like hyped. And then I was like, and then there was a little cheese, and I was like, okay. And then it was racing, and then it was awesome again.
So it was
They
good.
did a really, really awesome job. And once again, like taking the time and actually filming it and not doing CGI, because you would immediately be able to tell if it's CGI. Made a world of difference. And honestly, if getting that those types of shots is like the only way you can make it is by Hollywoodifying it, because that's how you get the most amount of people in it. Then I'm like, I'm okay with that deal. Then
that's fine. Yeah,
I can make that deal and be happy with it.
I agree. And also, to be honest, now that we've watched or talked about the movie so much, I'll be totally down to watch it again.
100%.
Just because
I want to see what else I missed. All of the racing, because like I already identified some racing moments from different races that we watched last year. There's more.
No, exactly. And there's more to see. Two, I just really enjoyed the whole roller coaster, the journey of the movie. And
I missed that part in the hospital, because that's when I picked to go to the bathroom, because I'm like, if you're talking, I can miss that. I don't want to miss the racing.
Fair. But yeah, let us know if you've watched the movie, if you're going to watch the movie, what your thoughts were on the movie. I would definitely be curious, so chime in. And we will see you here again on Monday. Monday we'll start back with our regular recaps. We're going to watch some Formula 1 this weekend. We're going to watch the MotoGP this weekend. And thank you so much for tuning in.
Bye-bye.
Bye.